꼬여 보여 약간 이런 거.
아, 네. 너무 잘하시는데요? 분명히 계셨어 그때.
예산.
네, 그때 계셨어.
근데 이렇게 보다 보니까 혹시 저게 어간은 아니겠죠?
아 저건가요?
이건가요?
아 이거구나.
야,
그러면은 잠깐 발을 붙여서 저기로
아니.
다시.
그 기술이 발전됐었네요.
그게 좀 심플해졌네요.
와, 신기하다.
아
여기 있었네.
여기 있었네.
내일 올 뻔했네.
와. 안녕하세요.
안녕하세요.
네.
전기차예요.
전기예요?
네.
와 현대적이다.
아, 체인이 없구나.
오늘 오토바이처럼
네.
이렇게 당기면 가요.
아, 브레이크. 이거 브레이크고요.
전원진 다 돼요.
요건 뭐예요? 스위치?
이거는 고속, 저속. 별 차이 없으니까 안 만지셔도 되고.
네.
꿀팁이에요 꿀팁.
혹시 이거 타고 들어가면은 의자왕을 만날 수 있는 건가요?
의자왕 이제 무덤 속에 가야 만나시고
역시 충청도요.
길만 따라가시면 돼요.
알겠습니다. 자, 우리 그
하시고.
여왕폐하께서는 앞에
네,
앉으십시오.
감사합니다.
네. 아, 이거 너무 웃긴다, 이거.
와, 아니 제가 꿈에만 그리던 궁에서 자전거나 이런 걸 탈 수 있을까 생각해봤는데 이게 현실이 됐어요.
한번 가보도록 하겠습니다.
가보도록 하겠습니다. 우와,
여왕폐하 가겠습니다.
결혼 안 했는데 여왕 이런 거 해도 되겠죠?
어떻게 빈궁마마라고. 야,
와, 너무 예쁘다. 와, 오, 평화롭습니다.
오늘 날씨도 너무 좋고.
네. 아니, 정말로 이 주변에 높은 것들이 아무것도 없잖아요.
네.
이 산 안에서 이곳에서 있으니까 진짜 그 백제에 있던 그런 기분이 나요.
야,
너무 좋다.
여왕폐하 어떻게
우와.
재미는 있으십니까?
완전 재밌습니다. 여기는 정말 뭐 어르신들도 많이 와 계시지만
아이들도
네,
너무
아이들과
좋아할 것
와도
같아요.
너무 재밌을 것 같고
연인분들이나
네.
뭐 이렇게 데이트하러 와도 딱 둘러보면서 데이트해도 정말 좋을 것 같아요.
진짜 재밌을 것 같아요. 이렇게 또 왕비 놀이를 하면서 또 얼마나 기분이 좋습니까 또. 와 진짜.
전보다 이게 훨씬 더 좋아진 것 같아요. 제가 여기에 한 10년 전인가?
10년 전에 이미 오셨었어요?
네, 10년, 그러니까 생긴 지 얼마 안 됐을 때
네.
당시 그때 한번 와봤었는데
네.
좀 많이 변했네요.
너무 즐겁습니다. 이대로 1시간 더.
1시간.
헛웃음이 나오신
소인
것 같은데요.
죽사옵니다.
네. 와 고생 많으셨습니다.
와. 그러고 보니까 안에 오늘 뭐 무슨 예식 있나 봐요.
네.
예, 맞습니다. 안녕하세요.
또 알아보셨어.
예.
안녕하세요.
그러시구나.
와, 축하드립니다.
아니, 오전에 우리가
네.
열기구 타면서 프로포즈하는 커플들을 만났거든요. 근데 이거 보니까 또 결혼식을 또 이렇게 보게 되니까.
전통
네.
혼례를 또 저희가 이렇게 볼 수 있는 기회가 생기다니.
아주 축하드립니다. 네.
이게 정말 특별하죠. 사실은 이제 누구나 뭐 꿈꾸는 그런 웨딩도 있지만
네.
이렇게 특별하게 이런 경험을 또 하객분들한테 드리는 것도 정말 특별한 것 같고.
맞습니다.
와 이번엔 또 어디인가요?
이곳은 의상을 좀 이렇게 체험을 할 수 있는.
좋다.
이곳에 왔으니까
네.
우리도 딱 의상을 딱 갖춰 입고 정말 백제인처럼.
너무 좋아요.
네.
그럴 줄 알고 롱 스커트를 입고 왔습니다.
역시
딱
왕비마마.
이렇게.
가시죠,
감사합니다.
왕비마마. 네. 소인이 모시겠사옵니다.
소인이라기엔 키가 너무 크십니다.
와.
우와, 너무 좋다. 저기 옷이 있어요. 주황색. 작아 보입니다.
아,
이게 제일 크네요. 아, 왕의 위엄이 약간 사이즈에서 느껴집니다.
아, 그럼 이거를 제가 한번 입어볼까요?
네.
오,
이야.
이거를
제 코디처럼 이렇게.
오, 괜찮다.
오, 멋있는데요? 저도 입고 있습니다.
오, 잘 어울리신다. 오,
안 그래도-
야,
오.
뭔가 치마도 맞춰 입으신 것 같은데.
네, 그러니까요. 마음에 들어요.
오,
이거 살 수 있나요? 구매까지.
아 진짜 이게 의상이
네.
백제 이 왕 옷들이 너무 예뻐가지고.
오.
자, 옷도 입었겠다. 또 앞에 또 어좌가 있지 않습니까?
와, 어자 너무 예쁜데요, 여기도?
야, 한번 앉아보시겠어요?
앉아보겠습니다.
네,
와.
앉아보세요.
앉아볼까요?
오.
이렇게 왕비는 이렇게 앉나요?
두 명의 여왕이 있잖아요.
네.
천추태후랑 선덕여왕.
와.
근데 오늘은 세봄여왕. 아, 딱
감사합니다.
나오셨다.
오늘 최초의 백제 여왕으로, 세봉 여왕으로 등극했습니다. 갑니다.
저도 좀 한번.
자, 드시지요.
네.
오. 어울려.
아니 확실히 여기를 앉으니까 느낌이 다르네요. 아니 뭐라 박혁거세가 쳐들어온다. 썩 물리치거라.
아니, 저도 한번 사진 찍어드릴게요.
야참을 대령하고.
야자. 오, 그림이다, 이거 완전.
drawing more fans from all over the world. Local consumer prices continue to hover at the 2% success rate in April. Turning to robots to allow the visually impaired the chance to better indulge in cultural experiences. Like the number of hybrid cars registered in South Korea has surpassed 2 million with this locally developed Yuri rocket.
Arirang.
Global heritage will unite. We share brilliant values and honor the world's most cherished legacies to pass our heritage on to future generations. Busan invites you. The 48th session of UNESCO World Heritage Committee. July 2026, Busan, Korea.
Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. The U.S. push for Greenland acquisition grows, with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent now saying Europe is too weak to guarantee Greenland security. The European Union is reportedly considering hitting the U.S. with retaliatory tariffs worth over $107 billion. Reports say up to 18,000 people have been killed in mass anti-government protests in Iran, while the Iranian president warns any attack on the country's supreme leader would be acknowledged as a declaration of war. President Lee Jae-myung will be hosting Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni for summit talks here in Seoul on Monday, with the two sides looking to expand the two countries' cooperation on trade, investment, and science and technology. Tensions are escalating between Europe and the U.S. over Washington's threat to impose new tariffs until it can acquire Greenland. EU leaders are mustering up a joint response that could include tens of billions of dollars worth of retaliatory measures. Our Oh Soo-young starts us off.
European leaders will hold an extraordinary summit this week as Brussels steps up preparations for a possible trade confrontation with the United States over Greenland. European Council President Antonio Costa said Sunday that he had decided to convene the meeting to coordinate the EU's response to US tariff threats. An EU official said the meeting is likely to be held in person on Thursday. The move follows an emergency meeting of EU ambassadors in Brussels on Sunday, where diplomats reached a broad agreement to intensify efforts to prevent US President Donald Trump from imposing tariffs on European nations next month. According to the Financial Times, European leaders are examining retaliation options that could reach close to $108 billion, including tariffs and possible restrictions on access to the EU market. This comes after Trump warned Saturday he would slap a 10% tariff on Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, Great Britain, the Netherlands and Finland, starting February 1st. He would hike those tariffs to 25% on June 1st and would maintain them until the US is allowed to purchase Greenland. Italy's Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni said Sunday that the US tariff threat was a mistake, while the Netherlands Foreign Minister called it blackmail.
This is not how allies should treat each other. And in that sense, I understand the word blackmail. Yes, absolutely. We have until February 1st to really present a united front to make it clear that we do not find this acceptable.
France and Germany have also taken a firm line, with Paris proposing that the EU examine all available countermeasures, including the bloc's anti-coercion instrument, adopted in 2023 to respond to political pressure exerted through trade. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said Sunday that the EU and Britain stand firm in their commitment to uphold the sovereignty of Greenland and Denmark. In her post on X, she says she discussed the developments with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, along with the leaders of Britain, France, Germany and Italy. Concerns are growing for the future of the transatlantic alliance.
This has become a matter between Europe and the United States. This has become a matter of the future of NATO, but also about the solidarity within the European Union. This is probably like the worst crisis in Danish foreign policy since the Second World War.
Even amid the criticism, US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent claimed on Sunday that Europeans project weakness while the US projects strength, and that the US needs Greenland to prevent war. With President Donald Trump expected to attend the World Economic Forum in Davos on Wednesday, the coming days will be decisive for Europe's next move. 오수영, Arirang News.
Iran's anti-government protests have left sharply disputed casualty figures, with estimates ranging from several thousand to as many as 18,000 dead, as unrest erupted last month begins to subside. Lee Seung-jae has more.
Casualty estimates from Iran's anti-government protests vary widely and remain unverified as the unrest that began last month appears to be easing. A report in the British newspaper The Sunday Times says between 16,500 and 18,000 people may have been killed, citing information from local doctors, with as many as 330,000 injured. Iranian authorities have not confirmed those figures. However, an Iranian official told Reuters that about 5,000 deaths have been confirmed, including roughly 500 security personnel. The U.S.-based human rights activist news agency estimates at least 3,308 deaths so far, saying arrests have exceeded 24,000, while thousands of additional cases remain under review. Iranian leaders, including Supreme Leader Ayatollah Sayyid al-Khamenei, blamed the violence on foreign interference, accusing the United States and Israel of inciting unrest. Iran's judiciary says no death sentences have been issued and claims investigations into possible foreign links could take years. According to the New York Times and Reuters, the protests have largely entered a lull. Meanwhile, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian warned on Sunday that any attack on the country's supreme leader would be treated as a declaration of war. In a post on X, Pezeshkian said that an attack on Ayatollah Ali Khamenei would amount to a full-scale war with the Iranian nation. The comments appear to respond to speculation that U.S. President Donald Trump is considering removing or targeting Iran's top leader. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
President Lee Jae-myung is set to hold a summit with Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni today. With Meloni's visit to Korea marking the first by an Italian PM in nearly 2 decades, the two leaders will be seeking to broaden Seoul-Rome cooperation. We turn to Professor Andrew Millard for more this morning. Good morning, Professor Millard.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
First, let's start with the upcoming Meloni summit. Now, this will be their second face-to-face. What do you think will be on the agenda to begin with?
So you're right. So as you just mentioned, this is really the first Italy-Korea summit in almost 2 decades, so in 19 years. So for that reason, this is quite a significant summit. I don't think this is going to be as big a summit as the previous meeting that Lee had in China with Xi and things like that. But there's still going to be several things on the agenda. So there's going to be some trade issues, both Italy and Korea looking to boost their trade cooperation, also supply chain resilience. As we know, a couple of years ago, there was also the mutual cultural exchange year from 2024 to 2025. So I'm pretty sure they'll also be discussing cultural exchanges, so people-to-people exchanges. As we know, in a few weeks' time, there's going to be the Winter Olympics held in Italy. So I think culture will also be a big part of the agenda. However, I think right now, just based on the timing, really security issues are going to be very high on this agenda. So for Prime Minister Meloni, she's going to be looking at what are the issues in Northeast Asia between China, South Korea, Japan, also the US, and vice versa for President Lee. This is really a great time to really sit down with Prime Minister Maloney and discuss what is really happening between the EU and the US in Greenland with these possible new trade war between the EU and US. This could have very big implications also for South Korea-EU relations as well.
So talks on regional security will likely top the agenda. Now, you mentioned supply chain resilience, Professor Miller. There's a particular focus on whether the two sides will issue a joint agreement on supply chain cooperation. The question is, how closely can South Korea and Italy actually work together on supply chains?
So actually, if you look over the past few years, South Korea and Italy have been sort of rebuilding and really strengthening their relationship, just in general, so for trade. So back in 2018, there was the strategic dialogue, the strategic partnership which they enacted. Back in 2023, there was also an MOU for industrial cooperation agenda. Last year, there was also the Italy-South Korea Business Forum, where, depending on different reports, at least more than 100 companies from both Italy and Korea met in Seoul. So that was in September. So there's definitely been a lot of progress, a lot of action, a lot of MOUs, discussions between Italy and Korea over the past few years. So they are really looking to build a lot more cooperation. When it comes to supply chain, however, we have to remember this isn't just about focusing on one country. Both Italy and South Korea, they're going around looking for different ways they can secure their supply chains. So for Italy, we see Prime Minister Maloney on this trip. She's also been to Oman. She's been to Japan. We've seen recently President Lee from South Korea also going to China, also going to Japan. So they're both looking for different ways. But I think definitely for South Korea, Italy, areas such as green technology, defense, aerospace, AI technologies, these are certain areas where there is a lot of complementary industries between the two countries. So there could be potential action there.
I see. Professor Miller, let's shift our attention to over in Europe. Calls are growing for the European Union to activate its anti-coercion instrument in response to the growing trade threat by the Trump administration. Can you explain what the ACI is and whether it can actually put any real pressure on the U.S.?
So the ACI, so the anti-coercion instrument, this is actually a relatively new instrument from the European Union. It was only adopted in late 2023. So far, it has never been actually initiated. So there was a time in 2024, something to do with China and electric vehicles. But at that point, it was actually blocked by Germany. But effectively, the ACI is where if the EU considers that a third country outside of the EU has some sort of economic threat or economic coercion against the EU, then the European Commission can decide, we want to take action against this country. They send it to the European Union Council. The Council then decides by what we call qualified majority voting, whether to take action or not. Now, if they decide to take action, which basically requires all of the EU member states to work together, then potentially they could increase tariff barriers, they could have restriction on imports or exports. So there are certain sort of ways that they can counter this coercion. If it doesn't happen, though, the European Commission still has the power to increase tariffs and so on anyway.
Well, I do have to ask you, will the ACI be effective? I mean, if not, what other options do European countries have to counter Trump's, ongoing ambitions for Greenland?
So again, the ACI, it could be very effective, but what the EU really needs for the ACI, and even without it, it requires unity. It requires all of the EU member states to stand together in solidarity to have a very coordinated response against these countries. So right now we can see with Greenland, there really is a very big threat. And right now it's against 8 members of Europe, not all the European Union. So really, there is a very strong threat against them, but it requires all 27 members of the EU to stand together to very strongly criticize the US and say, no, you cannot do this, because as Kaya Kallas, who is the EU High Representative, she just said, right now, China and Russia, they're having a field day because what is happening now, if we see divides happening within the European Union, this makes the EU very weak. So the EU member states, they must stay together. That's the most important point.
Unity appears to be the core message for now. Thank you, Professor Millard, for your time and your insight as always. You have a wonderful day.
Okay, thank you. You too.
South Korea and China will launch another round of negotiations over services and investment under their bilateral free trade agreement. According to Seoul's Trade Ministry, the 13th round of follow-up talks will kick off in Beijing on Monday for a 5-day stretch, with around 30 officials from both sides taking part. Since concluding the FTA in 2015, Seoul and Beijing have held 12 formal rounds of talks so far to create a broader trade and investment environment between the two countries. Following the Korea-China summit earlier this month, where leaders agreed to seek meaningful progress this year, the latest talks aim to accelerate negotiations to open up more services, investment, and finance. Tesla says it's close to completing the design of the next-generation AI-5 chip for its vehicle's full self-driving system. The company's CEO Elon Musk said on Saturday that the development of a later version, the AI-6, is also already underway. Musk added that Tesla is targeting a 9-month design cycle for future chip iterations. Now, looking ahead, Tesla plans to work with Samsung Electronics to manufacture the AI-6 chip. The two companies signed a $16.5 billion agreement last year, a deal widely viewed as a major boost for Samsung's contract chipmaking or foundry operations. While Gwangju City and Jeollanam-do Province and Daejeon City and Chungcheongnam-do Province are seeking administrative integration, the government will provide up to 20 trillion won for 4 years to each integrated special city. Cha Yun-kyung has more.
The government revealed plans on Friday to support integrated special cities formed through administrative mergers. Prime Minister Kim Min-seok announced during a press briefing at the government complex in Seoul a plan to provide assistance to cities and provinces that merge as part of the Lee Jae-myung administration's push for regional development. The government will provide up to 5 trillion won, approximately $340 million a year for up to 4 years to each integrated special city, aiming to ease the overconcentration of resources and people in the Seoul metropolitan area and promote more balanced national growth. A task force dedicated to financially supporting the integrations held its first official meeting, also on Friday, to devise detailed measures while consulting closely with the National Assembly. Prime Minister Kim said, merging local governments will be provided with clear incentives, autonomy, and accountability with the same administrative status as the capital city of Seoul. These new cities will also be granted priority for state-run companies relocating out of Seoul starting next year. Businesses that set up operations in newly merged regions will receive subsidies or tax benefits as part of efforts to turn them into the best city for businesses and startups. In terms of the new integrated cities naming and other concerns, legislative processes to accelerate mergers are in place in Daejeon and Chungcheongnam-do Province, as well as Gwangju and Jeollanam-do Province. Cha Yun-kyung, Arirang News.
Global audiences and critics alike have been swept away by the Netflix phenomenon KPop Demon Hunters, fueling high expectations for the next wave of Korean K-screen productions. Our culture correspondent Park Kwon-woo tells us more.
What began as an animated film inspired by Korean culture has grown into a global phenomenon. KPop Demon Hunters recently made headlines with its Golden Globes wins, sparking renewed discussion about the expanding creative power of K-culture. South Korea's culture minister also recently congratulated director Maggie Kang on the historic achievement, calling it a rare moment where a K-culture-based animated film was recognized globally for both creativity and artistic quality. The minister added that the film's success reflects the growing international influence of Korean pop culture, while also showing how stories rooted in Korean identity can resonate across cultural boundaries. Experts say the film's appeal goes beyond awards.
Compared to its competitors at the Golden Globes, KPop Demon Hunters presented a fresh and original animated work. It's neither a franchise nor part of an existing series. The film incorporates cultural motifs unfamiliar to the West, but presents them in an engaging way that's accessible to a global audience.
The same expert also noted that the film's release on a global streaming platform significantly expanded its reach, allowing international audiences to engage with Korean culture more directly. Adding that, this is even more meaningful at a time when the film industry has grown increasingly conservative amid a slowdown, with the movie industry relying more on star actors and directors instead of developing new creative ideas. Amid criticism that the film cannot be considered Korean content due to foreign investment, this argument was dismissed.
Considering the industrial influence of the film, that argument feels outdated. Since the release of the film, K-pop streaming has increased, and more people are learning Korean. Along with the rise in tourism, visitors are exploring Korean cultural elements featured in the film, which ultimately helps grow Korea's cultural industry.
From K-pop streaming to museum visits, the impact is already being felt. And now with the Grammy Awards and the Academy Awards still to come this year, the question is how much further Korean content can travel on the global stage. 박건우, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. In southern Spain, a collision between two high-speed trains has killed at least 21 people and injured dozens. The crash happened near Cordoba at around 6:40 on Sunday evening after a train traveling from Malaga to Madrid derailed and veered onto a neighboring track, colliding with a second train heading in the opposite direction, which then also derailed. Emergency services said at least 21 people were killed and 25 people suffered serious injuries. All rail traffic between Madrid and Andalusia is suspended as rescue operations are underway. The Pentagon placed about 1,500 active duty soldiers on standby for possible deployment to Minnesota amid protests in Minneapolis against the federal immigration crackdown. U.S. officials said on Sunday that the Army issued prepare to deploy orders to troops based in Alaska, though it remains unclear whether they will be sent. Tensions in Minneapolis have escalated after January 7th when an immigration and customs enforcement officer fatally shot protester Renee Good in her car. President Donald Trump has warned he could invoke the Insurrection Act if state officials fail to protect immigration agents. Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Fry said any military deployment would worsen tensions, calling it a dangerous escalation. In Guatemala, armed gangs killed 7 police officers on Sunday after authorities moved to retake control of prisons seized by inmates. The killings followed a major security operation to retake 3 maximum security prisons and rescue 46 guards who were held hostage. Inmates at the prisons had coordinated an uprising to demand greater privileges for a jailed gang leader. The government said the violence followed the arrest of a top figure in the Barrio 18 gang, which Guatemala has designated a terrorist group. Authorities have canceled school classes nationwide on Monday and launched joint police and military operations to secure urban areas, urging residents to stay home for safety. In Sri Lanka, anonymous owners unveiled on Saturday a 3,563-carat purple star sapphire, claiming it is the largest of its kind ever documented. A gem expert said the stone, named Star of Pure Land, displays a rare 6-ray star pattern known as asterism. The sapphire's owners said miners discovered the gem near Ratnapura in 2023. International valuers have estimated the sapphire's worth at $300 million to $400 million, and the owners have said they are ready to sell.
It was another rough start to the Monday morning commute for the central regions in Jeollabuk-do province with overnight rain and snow. And there could be more snow today. Watch out for icy patches and slippery conditions. And behind this system, a surge of freezing air will move in and temperatures will drop rapidly from this afternoon. Tomorrow morning, Seoul will be waking up to minus 13 degrees Celsius, and on Wednesday, it's going to feel like minus 20 degrees. And afternoon highs will also stay below freezing throughout the week. And this afternoon, Seoul will be getting up to 0 degrees with much improved air quality. Gwangju topping out at 4 degrees. Busan still mild at 10 degrees under brighter skies in most parts of Korea this afternoon. And we really need to prepare for the coldest time of the year this week and take precautions against cold-related damage. Also, if you are visiting Korea this week, make sure to bring the warmest jacket you have.
That is all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.
저는 만 5살에 바이올린을 시작했는데요. 바이올린 소리를 워낙 좋아했어서 그 특유의 따뜻함과 약간 사람의 목소리 같은 목소리를 갖고 있거든요, 바이올린이. 저는 무대에 올랐을 때보다는 이제 혼자 연습할 때 더 큰 희열을 느끼는데 제가 표현하고자 하는 음악이 잘 나왔을 때 그때 가장 큰 기쁨을 느끼는 것 같아요. 그래서 저만의 색깔을 어떻게 하면 찾아갈 수 있을까 그걸 제일 많이 고민하는 것 같아요. 아무래도 연습을 할 때는 이제 그 생각과 고민을 많이 하는 반면에 무대에서 연주할 때는 정말 머릿속을 비우고 아무 생각도 안 하려고 하는 것 같아요. 무대에서는 자유롭게 콩쿨 무대도 저만의 독주라고 생각하는 자세를 가지려고 하고 있어요. 사실 바이올린과는 거의 제 인생의 대부분을 같이 해왔기 때문에 저를 힘들게 할 때도 많지만 제가 가장 사랑하고 아끼는 존재입니다. 작곡가가 전달하고 싶은 메시지와 또 제 자신이 관객들에게 전달하고 싶은 메시지를 모두 다 설득력 있게 잘 전달할 수 있는 그런 연주자가 되고 싶습니다.
We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bringing news just for you. It's Monday, January 19th here in Seoul. I'm Isujin, and this is News Generation. And joining us today is Grace.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. Also, Moonju's with us.
Good morning.
Good morning. And both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. So we're at the start of a brand new work week, and as we settle back into what feels like a peaceful daily routine, it's worth remembering that stability isn't something we should ever take for granted. Around the world, many countries are still facing deep uncertainty and turmoil. So we're taking a moment to shine a light on those places. So Grace, to start us off, which countries are currently experiencing conflict and how serious is the situation?
Yeah, well, many countries are at war right now. The conflicts between Russia and Ukraine and Israel and Hamas continue. Civil wars are ongoing in Yemen, Sudan, Nigeria, and other countries. And it's unfortunate to say that the loss of life in these regions is significant.
Right, so we'll get more into that later. So do you have anything to add, Moonju?
Yeah, beyond the ongoing war, geopolitical instability is widening. East Asia faces looming Taiwan risk, while Iran is being rocked by large-scale protests. And meanwhile, tensions are spiking across South America following the recent arrest of Venezuelan president by the U.S. authorities.
Right, so all this really shows how instability today isn't confined to one region. From East Asia to the Middle East and South America, tensions are spreading in multiple directions at once. So we're going to talk more about this, but first, let's take a look at the screen.
While our daily lives may feel calm, that's not the reality everywhere in the world. Across the globe, many nations are currently embroiled in wars, civil unrest, or localized conflicts. These crises are reshaping geopolitics and influencing the world we live in, often in ways we don't immediately see. Today on News Generation, we take a closer look at the wars still underway, the civil and regional conflicts unfolding across different parts of the world, how the younger generations are responding to these crises, and what we as individuals can do in the face of global conflict.
So as we just saw in the video, conflict is far from a thing of the past, and in many parts of the world, wars are still very much ongoing. So let's start with the big picture. So we kind of talked about this in the intro. So what are some of the major wars that are currently happening in Greece?
There's the Israel-Hamas war, which started on October 7th, 2023, with a surprise, large-scale, multi-pronged attack by Hamas and other Palestinian militants from Gaza into Israel, involving rocket barrages and ground incursions that killed approximately 1,200 Israelis and took over 200 hostages. Israel responded by declaring war and launching a massive military offensive in Gaza, aiming to dismantle Hamas and rescue hostages, triggering the intense conflict. The two sides reached a ceasefire agreement last October, but Israel's demand for Hamas disarmament as a condition of the ceasefire has not been met, and both sides are preparing to resume fighting. Israel is considering deploying ground troops to the Gaza Strip, while Hamas is reportedly restoring its network of underground tunnels and seeking external funding to resume paying its fighters.
So that really highlights how fragile even a ceasefire can be and how quickly tensions can spiral back into conflict. And the situation in Gaza in particular shows how unresolved issues can keep a conflict alive. But that's not the only prolonged war the world has been watching. So what about the war in Ukraine? Where does that stand now?
There is also Ukraine war, as just you mentioned, launched by Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. The conflict will soon mark 4 years this year, with heavy casualties on both sides. Putin's justification for the invasion at the moment were the Ukraine's demilitarization, denazification, and the need to protect Russian residents in Donbas region. While Putin initially described this attack as special military operation, he later declared partial mobilization, which suggested a transition to a full-scale war. Since his time as President-elect, Donald Trump has expressed to help broker an end to the war and has met separately with suggested Presidents Putin and Zelensky. Yet neither a ceasefire nor a peace agreement has been reached, and each side accuses the other of lacking a real will of finding a peace.
So it's quite tragic how long that war has lasted and how enormous the human cost continues to be despite repeated talks about peace. And it really underscores how difficult ending war can be once both sides are so deeply entrenched. But beyond these headline conflicts, other crises often receive less attention. So what are some other civil wars or localized conflicts that are unfolding in other parts of the world, Grace?
Yes, the Yemeni civil war is a complex, multi-sided conflict that began over 10 years ago in late 2014. It's widely characterized as a regional proxy war between forces supported by Saudi Arabia and those supported by Iran. And because of that, resolving this conflict is very complex. And while not yet a civil war, anti-government protests are intensifying nationwide in Iran at a level unprecedented since the Iranian Revolution. And the international impact of this conflict is significant, with the Red Sea sometimes being blocked completely or flights disrupted due to the civil war. And this war has caused one of the world's most severe humanitarian crises, with over 377,000 deaths recorded by 2022. Approximately 4.5 million people remain displaced from their homes, and over 18 million people require humanitarian assistance to survive.
I mean, all this is very tragic. So there are also the ripple effects from disrupted shipping routes to regional issues are really felt beyond the borders. And unfortunately, that list doesn't end there. So Moonji, where else are internal conflicts or geopolitical tensions rising?
Yeah, armed conflict continues within countries such as Nigeria, Sudan, Somalia, and even in the Democratic Republic of Congo. In Northeast Asia, tensions over Taiwan have spiked. China and Japan are trading barbs to each other after Japan's prime minister suggested Tokyo might intervene in a contingency involving Taiwan, and this kind of prompt Chinese displeasure and retaliatory trade measures. In South America, turmoil followed the arrest of Venezuela's president by the U.S. authorities, which rattled the region and was followed by increased pressure on nearby Cuba.
Right, so what really stands out here is how widespread these tensions are. It shows that global instability isn't confined to one region and that today's conflicts are increasingly interconnected. So to learn more, we're going to actually speak with someone who's currently living in a region directly affected by the conflict. So that conversation will take place right after the break, so don't go anywhere.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search out channel Arirang News. Click Posts and cast your vote in the poll. Make a new type of news with us.
Joining us today is Sasha, Gen Z from Ukraine. Hello, Sasha. Thank you so much for connecting with us today.
Hello, nice to meet you all. Happy to be here.
Good to have you. So can you start us off by describing the current situation in Ukraine?
Yes, of course. So as you previously said, next month in February, it will be exactly 4 years since Russia's full-scale invasion in Ukraine began. The front line spans around 1,200 kilometers, but cities even over 1,000 kilometers from the front line are greatly affected as well. Of course, it is much more dangerous the closer you're situated to the battlefield. But nowhere in Ukraine is completely safe because drones and missiles from Russia can reach anywhere in Ukraine within a short period of time. Winters are especially harsh due to Russia's bombings of power stations across Ukraine. And so access to power and heating is not stable in multiple regions across Ukraine. In 2022, the Ukrainian armed forces were able to liberate many cities and towns from Russian occupation, but there haven't been huge breakthroughs on the ground for neither Ukrainian defenses nor Russia's advance recently. There has been some progress towards a peace plan in the past year in the works between Ukraine, the US, and European countries as well. However, Ukrainians feel skeptical and a peaceful resolution in the near future seems a bit far-fetched. And that's the general overview.
Thanks for that explanation, Sasha. Since the war began, then, what has changed the most in daily life for you and the people around you?
I would say a lot of things have changed. I'm currently based in Seoul, so I'm only visiting home for a month at the moment. But hearing sirens that alert the possibility of a missile attack, scheduled power outages have all become the norm. People have to plan their daily life around when there will be power in order to do basic household chores like cooking and using a washing machine. Something that people abroad do not realize is that all of Ukraine has become a no-fly zone since February 2022. So the only way to enter or exit the country is on ground, which is by a car, train, bus, or on foot. I have to take a bus to Hungary or Poland and take a flight from there. So no flights operate in the Ukrainian airspace, which has a huge impact on the Ukrainian economy, things like imports and exports, and the workforce is also declining. And so most regions also have a curfew at night from around 12 a.m. to 5 a.m., where civilians cannot be outside for safety reasons. But despite all this, we try to remain hopeful and live our day-to-day lives.
I see that should be a huge change for you all Ukrainians. Looking ahead, what are you hoping this year personally and also for Ukraine?
So I think all Ukrainians, myself included, have been hoping for the same thing since 2022, which is victory for Ukraine. Maybe 2026 could be the year that it happens. So we just want safety for our loved ones. We want peace that is fair and lasting. Ukrainians are resilient, but too many people are losing their lives, homes, and livelihood. So we don't want the peace to be temporary with another wave of Russian attacks disrupting life in a decade or so. And we don't want the war to carry over to the future generations as well. So especially those of us, such as myself, from my generation, we were born and we grew up during Ukraine's independence. So we experienced many events such as the Orange Revolution in 2004, the Revolution of Dignity in 2013, and also the annexation of Crimea and Eastern Ukraine that was starting in 2013, 2014. So, and now in the past 2 years, it's been the full-scale war. So we know the value of our country's freedom, and so we want to make sure it lasts. And so, yes, that's what we are hoping for in the near future.
I mean, I can't imagine what it's like having to take the bus all the way to Hungary and then when you're coming back to Seoul. So I just hope you stay safe, and thank you so much for sharing your insight with us today.
Yes, of course. Thank you.
So we've just heard directly from someone in Ukraine about the current situation on the ground, how daily life has changed since the war began, what she's hoping for in the year ahead. So her story reminds us that these conflicts aren't just distant headlines, but lived realities. So that brings us to our next question. So how are younger generations, Grace, especially Gen Zs and millennials, responding to these kinds of global conflicts these days?
Yeah, well, it seems like millennials and Gen Z are generally active in anti-war movements due to their sensitivity to injustice and open expressions of their opinions. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, protests led by younger generations erupted across the country, resulting in as many as 3,000 arrests. And in the United States, millennials and Gen Z also staged protests, mainly on college campuses, condemning the massacre of Palestinian civilians.
Right, so this really shows how strongly young people respond to what they see as injustice and how willing they are to speak out even when it comes at a personal cost. So from mass arrests to campus protests, their voices are clearly shaping the conversation. And this kind of activism isn't limited to countries directly involved in war. So are we seeing similar movements even in countries that aren't directly tied to these conflicts, Minju?
Yeah, definitely. Even those countries without the clear stakes, they're seeing active anti-war movements led by Gen Z calling for peace. South Korea also isn't deeply entangled in the current international, this conflict, but anti-war protests are all still seen, not all, but still seen in Seoul. And many who can't attend kind of shows quite support by sharing posts on social media.
It's interesting how activism today doesn't always mean going out on the streets, or whether it's protest, online campaigns, or quiet expressions of solidarity, younger generations are finding different ways to engage. So this raises a bigger question for all of us. So Grace, with so many conflicts unfolding around the world, so what can we realistically do as individuals?
Yeah, these conflicts are very complicated based on a massive international political mechanism, making them difficult to resolve in a short period of time. Nevertheless, I think it's important for us to continue to pay attention because the impacts of war and conflict have the ability to directly and indirectly impact our lives. For example, while Korea isn't currently engaged in conflict, the reality is that we still are a divided nation. The Korean Peninsula is technically still under an armistice, not a formal peace treaty, since the 1953 Korean War Armistice Agreement, which paused the hostilities but never officially ended the war. Therefore, even though we here in Korea live as though we are not in conflict, the reality is that the two Koreas are in a state of unresolved conflict and military tension, with the DMZ as a heavily fortified border.
I think that's a very important reminder. So even when solutions feel distant, attention itself and awareness also really matters, especially for a country like Korea, which knows all too well what it means to live under an unresolved conflict. So if change feels overwhelming at the global level, perhaps it starts with smaller, more personal actions. So what are some other meaningful ways people can get involved in June?
Yeah, as we are all in different, social statuses and positions, I think the ways we can contribute to a peaceful world vary widely. The most important thing here is not to overreach, but just to do what you can in your status and positions. Even small acts of support does matter. Realistically, I think the best we can do as civilians are just keep calling for anti-war and peace. And as Grace just mentioned earlier, that's how Gen Zs and millennials are trying these days right now. And also, while our individual voices might seem minimal, and that's kind of many people I think are thinking that way, but still, if those are added as a group, I think it can exercise as a meaningful effect. And other means, you could consider making a small donations to help civilians affected by the war, and it could also mean a lot for them.
So small actions do go a long way. So as we go back to our daily routines, it's worth remembering that peace isn't a given. So behind the headlines are real people living through conflict every day. And while we may feel far removed, stay informed, staying empathetic, and choosing not to look away still really matters. So conflict may feel distant, but its effects are global, and so is our responsibility. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of News Generation. But News Gen will be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Korea time with more stories and discussions. A big thanks to Grace.
Thanks for having me.
Coming in, also Moonju.
My pleasure.
And to our viewers, thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope you have the best day. We are News Generation.
Curious about Korea?
And especially K-food? How familiar are you with Korean food? The sea on three sides, a mountainous terrain, and 4 distinct seasons. Thanks to these conditions, Korean cuisine bursts with diverse and unique flavors.
Do you prefer sweet or spicy?
A meat lover or a seafood connoisseur?
Can't decide?
There's got to be something here that you like.
For Koreans, rice is foundational. It's a staple and the centerpiece to all meals in Korea. There's bibimbap, rice mixed with vegetables, gukbap, rice in hot soup, and kimbap is the demand around the world.
For me, it's noodles over rice. Korea has amazing noodle dishes. Chuyi ramen and cold naengmyeon to blow away the heat. A meat lover here, pork, beef, chicken, I like them all. Did you know that bulgogi is listed in the English dictionary? There's also the famous chimek, chicken and beer, which is the best combo for a night out with friends.
Surrounded by the sea on 3 sides, Korea has a great selection of seafood, from raw fish to piping hot seafood soups. It's mouth-watering just talking about it. The 2 pillars of Korean condiments, gochujang and soy sauce.
Ooh, what do you prefer?
Gochujang. I like anything made with gochujang. In general, Koreans love spicy food.
I prefer the soy sauce base. There's something about the salty and sweet that hits the right spot. I think even those who are trying Korean food for the first time will really like it.
But that's not all.
We can't leave out the street food. If you're in Korea, it's a must try. They are both treats for your eyes and mouth.
How about it? Mouth-watering, right?
Korean food, you've got to try it. Discover a whole new world of flavors.
지금도 너무 생생한데 요즘도 너무 힘들어서 지치거나 피곤할 때 항상 이걸 찾게 되는 것 같아요. 저는 전 태권도 국가대표, 현재는 태권도 해설위원을 하고 있는 이대훈이라고 합니다. 삼계탕이라는 요리 자체가 몸보신할 때 먹는다라는 느낌을 어릴 때는 못 받았었어요. 왜냐면 운동을 그렇게 막 힘들게 안 했기 때문에. 근데 중학교 형들이랑 같이 운동을 시작할 때 첫 회식이 삼계탕이었었어요. 제가 가장 강력한 인상을 받았던